Okay, I think we're good to go. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Barry Drummond from Körber Supply Chain. If you're not sure how to pronounce it, it's pronounced Körber, even though everybody calls it Körber. But again, don't worry about that either, because we're going through a rebrand and we won't be using Körber anymore. We're going to be called Infios, so you might see some news about that coming out. So, what I'm going to talk about this morning is supply chain resilience, building supply chain resilience, and the disruption around supply chain that requires us to create resilience. So this is based on not just my experience. I've been in the industry for 30 years, and I know what you're all thinking. Geez, look at him. I need to get out of the industry if that's what it does to you. So I've been in the industry for 30 years experience in supply chain, but Körber obviously a lot more years of experience, and we have 2,400 customers globally. So a lot of this experience that we're looking at here is based on our customers. So we'll be looking at research, I guess, from our customers, and also some of the strategies that they put in place to build in resilience into their supply chains, and also some of the technologies that they've employed as well. So if we look at complexity within supply chain, there's no question about the fact that supply chains are becoming far more complex than they ever used to be. So this is research that we conducted to our supply chain customer base, and we did it in 2020, and then we did it again in 2023. Now, there should be no surprises really to see that supply chain complexity, as far as they were concerned, increased significantly over that period of time, because something happened that I think we all know about. And initially in 2020, they said that supply chain complexity had increased by 50%. However, when we got to 2023, they were saying actually it's increased by 71%. So quite a big leap in a short period of time. Now, as we know, something happened at that point in time, but things have kept happening, and we'll see that shortly. So complexity is increasing. However, the good news is that people feel that they're more able to deal with those disruptions now than they were previously. So maybe COVID brought something specifically around that area. But then if we come to the right-hand side, what we're also seeing is that supply chains are becoming more strategic in the business. You know, if I go back to when I first started in the industry, you didn't really see supply chain on the board. So supply chain logistics was kind of like this dirty thing. It was warehousing, it was trucks, it was stock. It's like, okay, well, you guys deal with that. We'll run the business. Supply chain has elevated massively over the last few decades, and it's got a seat at the board. It's strategic. It's about business growth. It's about business success. You can't succeed without a successful supply chain. And at the same time, if you don't have a strong supply chain, it will take the business down with it. So supply chain resilience is fundamental in business growth, and that was one of the things we heard last night. And these are some of the challenges that executives are saying that they're having to deal with within that supply chain. So visibility is one of the bigger ones. You know, where are things? Because if you can't understand where things are, you can't work out how to improve it. It's one of those things, you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So visibility is fundamental to achieving good stability within the supply chain and good resilience. But 50% say that they're struggling with customer demand. So what customers are requiring from us these days is far more demanding than what it ever was in the past. You know, in terms of product, in terms of speed of delivery, service level, it's far more demanding, and those expectations need to be met, because if they're not, customers will disappear. Also, from an ESG perspective, we're being asked to be much more green in our supply chains, and that's one of the areas where organizations can be more green. They estimate that it's around about 50% of the ESG initiative can be improved through the supply chain, through logistics. But if customers are asking for more product, if they're asking for it quicker, how do we do this at the same time? Because, you know, we're shipping more, we're moving more, we're packaging more, we're doing it faster, but they're asking us to be more green. So if we drop down a little bit deeper into this, this is feedback from our customers in terms of what they're seeing from a challenge, and they're saying that the end customer is changing. So we've talked about, you know, customers are more demanding. You know, think about that kind of Amazon effect that we call it, and that's, you know, we want it quicker, and, you know, we want more of it, and we want to be able to return it for free because we don't like it, and we want, you know, you to pay for these things. We want free delivery. So they're saying that customers are being more challenging from that perspective, but they're also saying that customers are being more challenging because we have, you know, a growing population that are now more focused on green credentials. So your product needs to be green, and if for whatever reason it's not green, if it's not ethical, I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to go buy from somewhere else. So that's what, you know, our customers are saying that they're seeing now within consumers. Also, from a labor engagement perspective, it's hard to get warehouse staff these days. Whenever I go and speak to a new customer, the challenge that they're always talking about is people within the warehouse. You know, we can't get people, we can't keep people. And so that's a big issue in terms of growth, because if you can't get people to fill your warehouse, how do you build more warehouses? So again, if we go back to, you know, the generations that are coming into the workplace, they don't want to work in warehouses. They don't want to work in supply chain because it's manual labor. They don't like manual labor. They want to do, you know, kind of more clerical stuff or stuff that's less manual. It's dirty, it's heavy, it's hard. And so they don't see supply chains as being attractive places to go and work. So the challenge in terms of the workforce is only going to get worse. It's not going to get easier. We have things like e-commerce, which is attractive because it opens up new channels to us, but it also creates new challenges in the supply chain itself. So makes life easier, makes life more difficult. Just-in-time delivery, I'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but this is more about inbound. So we're trying to bring inventory into the business, maybe from overseas, from China. How do we bring it in at the right volumes at the right time? Big issue, especially nowadays with the supply chain disruptions that we're seeing. And then from an SKU and supplier perspective, we're seeing proliferation in that space. So SKU proliferation is really about the demand from consumers to give them more products. You know, if you think about something simple like a packet of Walker's crisps, you know, 20 years ago or whatever, if you went into the supermarket, you go, packet of Walker's crisps, cheese and onion, salt and vinegar, ready salted in individual bags. Nowadays, if you go into the supermarket, you can get Walker's crisps in individual bags. You can get them in multi-packs with different flavors. You can even get, you know, if there's a World Cup on or something like that, then you get a specific bag around the World Cup or whatever. So there's far more SKUs than there ever used to be, which you might say, okay, well, where's the big deal in that? But those SKUs have to be managed as individual SKUs. They have to be stored as individual SKUs after they've been manufactured. And so therefore, warehousing space and warehousing systems have to be handle more complexity. In terms of supplier proliferation, if you think about going back to COVID times, and just after that, you may remember that if you wanted to buy a new car, it's very difficult to get hold of a new car because manufacturers couldn't produce new cars. Nothing wrong with the production facilities, they just couldn't get hold of a microchip, and that microchip was in the car, and because it was scarce, couldn't produce it. So nobody could buy new cars. Second-hand market went through the roof because everybody's buying second-hand vehicles. And so a way to deal with that is that they now have multiple suppliers for that microchip, But to be able to do that, you have to adapt the product. You can't just have the same product end product, because it has to accept a different type of microchip. So you have to put research and development into that product to be able to accept the different types of SKUs. So what customers are saying is that the SKU proliferation is happening. However, it introduces far more complexity to the business than just simply having a different supplier of that different SKU. Then we have seasonal peaks. You probably all experience it in different ways. Some companies I go to, and that seasonal peak is 4, 5, 6 times their standard volumes. But in terms of the supply chain handling that, that's a big challenge, because you have to be able to flex up and down within your supply chain, especially if you're running your own supply chain. Add to that some additional external macroeconomic factors, so environmental factors, natural ones. We're seeing far more natural disaster around the world than we ever used to do. And so bringing that in to the equation means that if we're shipping from a certain location around the world where it's likely there's going to be some kind of issue with a natural disaster, how do we manage that? Because we have to be proactive in terms of making the supply chain resilient. It's not just a case of reacting because something's happened. We have to design it to be able to deal with these things. From a political and economical perspective, we heard last night about the Trump administration's back in. We might not think too much about that, but actually it's going to impact supply chains, because trade tariffs are going to determine where things are manufactured. Some of us might be actually trading in the US, and so how is that going to impact that? How is that going to impact consumption out there? So will the volumes drop? Will volumes go up? We don't know, because we don't know what the impact of those things will be. But our supply chain has to be able to respond to that effectively and quickly. This slide surprised me when I first saw it. It's a little bit out of date now, so it's probably got a lot worse than this. But if you look at the number of supply chain disruptions over the years, it's huge. But if you go from 2000 to 2010, that's a 10-year span. There's not a lot of noise in there. But if you go from 2010, to 2022, that's 12 years. Look at the difference. Look at the acceleration of disruption. And, this is only 2022, so if we bring it up to date, I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more in there. So what you've got to take from this is that the job isn't going to get easier, it's just going to get more difficult. And so supply chains have to be able to respond to what we're seeing here and, what we're going to see for a few years to come. So sorry to be a bearer of bad news. Life's going to get more difficult, but there are things that we can do to improve it. Okay. So these are 3 imperatives, really, in terms of making supply chains more resilient. And this was the feedback that we got. So the first thing really was to improve visibility, to have visibility of what is happening out in the market, to have visibility of what is happening in the supply chain and what the options are. And we'll see a bit more about this as we progress. So once you've got that visibility, it's then a case of analyzing. You have to analyze the data, the information that you've got, and from that create strategies. So those strategies might be bringing in new technology to be able to fulfill that, but you can't get to this point until you've done that bit. So it's analyze what's happening, determine the correct course of action, and bear in mind the course of action that you're determining is proactive. So we're trying to deal with those things that we saw on the previous slides. We need to be proactive, and we need to work out then how do we mitigate the risk. So see, these are some of the strategic things that our customers say that they do to mitigate the risk and to build resilience. So they're diversifying, and by diversifying, they're diversifying their suppliers. So we talked a bit about that with the sort of the car microchip model. For some industries, it really is imperative to be able to move away from single source and have opportunities. That might not be purely and simply because, you know, the product that you've got is, the component that you've got is from a single source, and so therefore, you know, we want to split that out. It might also be that where that product is coming from has a risky route into your organization, into your warehouse. And by risky, I mean, it could be, you know, Suez Canal, it could be war somewhere, it could be because, you know, wherever it's coming from, they're prone to extreme weather conditions. And so therefore taking risk out means let's have a look at that and work out how we get around it. So looking at supplies is quite key. Also, when you look at things like channels, so what we're seeing is a lot of customers kind of moving away from just selling through retailers. And what they're doing is they're opening up an e-commerce site. From that e-commerce site, they can then sell direct to a consumer, and they can fulfill directly from a manufacturing or from a warehouse. But if you decide to go down that route, you're building in a huge amount more complexity, and so therefore, that's going back to the previous slide where you have to analyze that and have visibility of what that's going to look like, and then work out what are the technologies that we might need to bring in to be able to help us get there. In terms of inventory, the model very much used to be, and still is in some cases, keep it to a minimum. Let's be lean. We don't want stock, it costs a lot of money, we've got to manage it, it's a risk, but that's kind of disappearing now. So certainly when I talk to supply chain executives, they're saying, actually, we want to keep more stock because we're moving to this just-in-case model now. You know, if we end up having some kind of a crisis, we want to be able to manage that, and so therefore we have some additional stock. And that's fine, but what that means is that we need more stock holding locations, and so we're seeing warehouses springing up here, there, and everywhere. But then if you have warehouses, you need people in those warehouses. We've already talked about the fact that it's hard to find people to fill warehouses, so we need a strategy to deal with that too. Collaborating with partners, one of the biggest collaborations I saw back in 2017 was Nestle and United Biscuits. So two of the biggest competitors on a shelf with, you know, a Kit Kat and a Penguin, and fierce rivals, but they entered into a collaboration to distribute product to the customer, and, you know, you ended up with United Biscuits lorry pulling up into Nestle, half a load full, filling up with Nestle product, delivering to end customer. So that is an example of where you have fierce rivals who, for the better, if you like, decide that actually we need to compete because we're doing the same thing in terms of logistics, and so let's collaborate logistically and for the greater good. So maybe that's something that that would work for your organizations. And then reducing dependency on labor. So we've talked about the fact that warehouses need labor, but we can't get that labor. How do we reduce our dependency on it? And one of the things that we're seeing a lot more of is companies either doing or planning to move to automation, to more automation, because it removes that dependency on people. So we're going to look at a few of our customers now, and these are examples of things that they've done to sort of mitigate the challenges that we've seen in the slides previously. So Titan Brands is a US company, US brands company, 200 200 million turnover business. They are an online retailer, and they retail agricultural products, outdoor products, as you can see here, some fitness products. And one of the challenges that they had was around the visibility. So that's one of the things that we talked about earlier. And that visibility was causing them huge issues in terms of fulfilling customer orders. And so they had pretty poor service level. And what they decided to do was introduce an order management system. And that order management system raised the visibility of their inventory. So prior to that, they couldn't see inventory that was available in the warehouse at that time for their customers. So customers couldn't order it. Whereas now, customers have got real-time visibility of inventory in the warehouse, and they can order it if it's available. But they kind of went one step further than that, because they wanted to make inventory that was in transit available to their customers as well. So the end customer can go onto the web store, they can see inventory that's in transit, and that's actually something that they can then purchase if it's within the lead time that they want to make their purchase. And by doing so, you can see the reduction on back orders that they had there. So 70% reduction on back orders purely and simply by making inventory available in transit. Engelbert Strauss, based in Germany. So they've been with us since 2013, and they've been on the sort of continuous improvement since then. So they have a very sophisticated, highly automated warehouse, which we'll see in a minute. So they produce clothing, workwear, footwear, but they produce it in huge volumes. So they have inventory storage, about 1 million inventory storage locations within their warehouse. And they ship a huge amount of product as well. So they're handling, I think, in the region of 50,000 parcels a day. But the thing that's quite unique about these guys is that they have a highly customized product. So they're creating workwear that might have, the employee's name on it, for example. So not only is it specific to that organization, but it's specific to a specific employee. So it's very customized product at high volumes, so almost at a bulk volume level. So to be able to do that, they've introduced automation to make themselves resilient. They introduced the automation, and then they carried on expanding. And when they expanded further, what they did was built a second distribution center. And when they designed the distribution center, they decided that the way to do that was to introduce a digital twin software. And so that's what they did. They introduced a product of ours which creates a digital twin of their warehouse. So this is a greenfield warehouse. They haven't even built it yet. You can use the tool on an existing warehouse, but they hadn't built it yet. Because this was such a big investment, they wanted to get it right. So they tested different scenarios of their automation, of their layout, to figure out what was the optimum way and to work out, actually, can we get the throughput that we need based on this particular design? So that's how they went about it. But this is a really impressive warehouse. I love it. And if you're a warehouse geek, you'll love it. I know it's sad. But here's a little video of Engelbert Strauss.
Engelbert Strauss produces clothing, workwear and footwear, including custom products for many well-known brands. With demand increasing for customized product, the company built an advanced factory integrated with an omni-channel warehouse. Advanced technology allows a highly customized product to be manufactured in small quantities on demand at a cost comparable to mass production. A customer for 7 years, Engelbert Strauss again turned to Körber to design the software and control system for this complex facility and for the advanced software required to integrate production, logistics, and fulfillment. Körber's integrated WMS and WCS software manages a triple-deep automatic storage and retrieval system with high-speed shuttles that transfer products to light-guided picking workstations. This allows pick rates up to 12,000 items per hour. As a result, operating at peak capacity, Engelbert Strauss can ship up to 4,000 orders per hour. Another successful project in Engelbert Strauss's long-standing partnership with Körber.
So that's quite an impressive facility that they've got over there, and they have 2 warehouses like that now. We're working with us in partnership with us. So Sainsbury's probably need very little introduction. They're major supermarket brand in the UK, have around 600 supermarkets and 800 convenience stores within the UK. But they also, as you all know, purchased Argos as well. So you might think, okay, well, they just bought another brand, but actually it's a completely different business model. So you have Argos that they purchased, which is, one of the biggest online retailers in the UK. It's actually the 3rd most visited online retailer in the UK. And so what that meant was that you've now got a different business model where around 90% of orders are initiated online versus their traditional model. And you need different systems really to be able to manage that. So they got this heterogeneous environment of different systems once they acquired Argos. And what they needed to do was then be able to assimilate these systems and make them all work for the different business models that they now had. So one of the things that they did was they introduced the warehouse management system and also a voice picking system in their locations. Not all, this is still being rolled out. And it kind of transformed the type of business that they were in terms of being able to, pick, pack and ship. But really where they were going, and from a resilience perspective, was the WMS gave them the ability to own the solution. So their internal team manage, develop the WMS system. I think, okay, well, that's nice. What's the big deal there? But for them, what that meant was that in a changing world where things are changing constantly, we need to be able to be in control of our systems. We need to be able to change as the world around us is changing. And so therefore, this is a strategic procurement because it changes how we are able to react to changes in supply chain and in the market. Boxy, they're a 3PL in Hungary, and I'll whip through this because we're kind of coming towards the end, so I want to wrap up. But Boxy's approach was very different. So as a kind of more of a startup 3PL, they didn't have baggage, and so they were in a position to say, let's design this to be resilient. Let's design this to be scalable. So they went robotic and automation. So they've got a highly robotic environment to manage their parcels. They have autonomous mobile robots that do goods to person. So they'll bring a racking to the person rather than the person having to walk around. So people don't walk around the warehouses there, they just stay at the picking and packing area. And the robots take care of all the hard work. They also have sortation robots as well, so they do the parcel sorting, not people. So all of that is automatic. And for them, the reason they designed it that way was to be scalable, scale up and scale down. So as volumes change and as requirements change, what they're able to do is to rent more robots. It's as simple as that. And when volumes go down, then they off-rent the robots. So from a financial perspective, they don't have a commitment in terms of purchasing all of that. They have that on tap, and they turn it on and off as and when required. So it reduces their dependency on people, but it also gives them that ability to be able to turn things on and off as required. So we'll skip the last two and we'll wrap up. This one for me was I found quite interesting. The reason I find it interesting is because this was a survey that was done in 2022, I think. And what they were saying then was, this is AI, and what is your strategy in terms of AI to our customer base? And what essentially we were saying was that 19% said they didn't really have, said that they had, and the rest said that they didn't really have a strategy around AI. Which is interesting because AI is kind of the new thing. All of us as vendors are talking about it, but actually it's not being used. And I thought, okay, well, that's 2022, but I went to a conference last year by a consulting company called Scala, you may have heard of, and they asked the same question to the audience. So it was filled with execs just like yourself from sort of major brands, and everybody had a clicker to be able to place a vote, and everybody voted. And that number there on the left-hand side was 69%. So it hasn't changed much, but it's fascinating because AI is, the latest tech that everybody's talking about in terms of being able to take us to that next stage in terms of supply chain resilience. And not many of us are planning to use it. And I'm not saying that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there might be very good reasons why we don't want to use it in the workplace today. But fascinating that we don't just yet. So wrapping up, really it's these three imperatives that we need to look at in terms of building supply chain resilience. It's about improving visibility, because without the visibility we can't make the changes. So we have to understand where things are. We have to be able to measure them, quantify them, to then be able to devise a solution. That solution might be a technical solution, it might not be a technical solution, but until we've done stage 1 and 2, we can't get to the solution. And that is it. I've run out of time, but I'm on time. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you've got something out of that. We're going to be around. Is it time for questions? Is that the case? Okay. Sure. Okay. So does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? No? Oh, there's a question at the back.
Clive Rumsey from InterSystems. You touched upon AI at the end there. From your perspective, admittedly it's not been adopted en masse yet, but what do you see the, specific use cases being?
Yeah, we look at AI, and it's kind of almost a dirty word in Körber, because I like to call it data science, because AI is like, well, what's AI? How do you define it? So a lot of the time we call it data science. We've got a data sciences team that look at AI. So areas where we're using it is we have a tool called a slotting tool, and we call it slotting IQ, not slotting AI. So the slotting tool basically analyzes the warehouse inventory and the layout of the inventory in the warehouse. It analyzes picking, so it will look at a product and it will say how often is that being picked. So the fast runners, it will move those to locations where you don't have to walk too far to get to those. Slow runners, it will put them at the back, and then it will also be quite intelligent, and it will look at every third time you pick that product, you also pick that one as well. So put them together next to each other, and it will reduce walk time. So it does that kind of intelligence. It also sort of like takes into account seasonality, so it will reslot from a seasonal perspective, and so that's where we're building our kind of AI intelligence in terms of being able to be more efficient without the execs having to do the planning. The tool should do that for you. And there are other tools out there as well from a planning perspective that I've seen, not ours, but other tools that are very advanced in terms of forecasting, that use AI. But from our perspective, we're supply chain execution, so we're on the execution side, and that's where we introduce our AI, or data science. All right, thanks. Any other questions? Yeah.
Why do you think the adoption of AI is still
So
so low?
low. I mean, if I was to answer that question, it is only my personal opinion, is that there's an element of fear around AI still, that we don't, number one, fully understand it. So whenever, we talk to customers about solutions that are a bit black box, they fear black box because I don't know what's going on. And so it's going to spit something out, and I don't know how it got there. So if I don't know how it got there, I can't justify that, and I don't know, if it goes wrong, then how do I fix it? So I've got to trust this thing that it's going to give me the right answer. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think there's still an element of fear around our data. So what's happening? Because if you want to get something out of it, you've got to put your data in there. And so there's an element of fear about, well, if we chuck our data into an AI model, where's that going? Who's got access to that? And although there are some good answers to those questions, fear, is one of those things that is very hard to overcome. And so until we start to overcome that fear, I think the adoption will be slow. Yeah. Somebody else have their hand up? Oh, we're out of time. No, I thought somebody had their hand up around here, but oh yeah. You wanted to ask the question? Oh, it's already been answered. Okay, right. Okay, thanks. So we'll wrap things up then. So please feel free to come and have a chat to us. We're just outside the door on the left-hand side, and whether you just want to come and have a chat and have a coffee with us or whatever, we don't mind. But we look forward to speaking to you over the remainder of the day, and enjoy the remainder of your day. So thank you.